Welcome to Family Quest. My name is HistoryWes. This is episode 60, and we are still working on phase 2 of our megabase. And phase 2 is filling up the giant hole with all of our stuff that we need. So here we are at the iron mining level. It's not finished. We don't have our permanent lighting up. We'll remove some of these torches at some point. But you see we're going to have 4 mine shafts going off in the 4 cardinal directions. And still got plenty of access hallways that we have to complete. They're going to have deep slate tiles all around. So from there we have the lowest level of our storage area, which contains 320 different items, 2 chests for each one. 1 flight above. And the next layer, which has 160 items with 5 chests for each. Is that 5 or 6? It's 6. Okay. This is the next level. Another 160 items, 6 chests for each, and then there's a 3rd level. And this one is all labeled. Notice I'm using signs instead of item frames to cut down on lag. And likewise, on top of all of the hoppers, I have a furnace. And that also is supposed to cut down lag. And it seems to be working. My son tells me that he has dropped down a little bit because of the frame rate, because of the lag. But his computer is much less beefy than mine, and he can still manage to play here at my base, whereas my old base he had some trouble with. And it didn't have nearly as big of a storage system. So, that's the state of things. Last time we read chapter 3 of the story of the Destroyer Return. So while I'm working, let's go ahead and I'll read you the 4th chapter.
The Destroyer Returns Part 4, Misty Brook. "Let me out!" shouted Wrath, banging on the door. Claws tore right through his leather jacket and into the skin of his shoulder. He threw himself once again against the iron door. This time it flew open, and he went sprawling on the ground beyond. He quickly jumped to his feet and stared back in morbid fascination at the creature he could now clearly see. If anything, its ghoulish features were even worse in the waning daylight. The monster stepped back into the darkness, and the door slammed shut. Wrath watched as Misty Brook slid the metal bolt into the locked position. "What the hell was that thing?" he gasped. "It's one of the old ones," she said. "Most of them disappeared a long time ago, but a few wait for the return of the destroyer." "Brigg locked me in there with that thing." "Yes, I know." She stepped close to him. "He's in the tavern now." "That bastard." "You'll need this," said Misty Brook, shoving something into his hand. "A big knife?" "It's a sword." Nestled within the sheath attached to a belt was an 18-inch long blade, 4 inches wide, double-edged. It wasn't Wrath's idea of a sword, but he wrapped the belt around his waist so that the scabbard rested on his left hip. "Go," said Misty Brook. "Then come to my house. I'll be waiting." Wrath stomped up the slope and into the village. The edge of the sun kissed the horizon as he burst through the door of the tavern. Almost all of the town's adults were there in the large room, as well as a few older children. The air was filled with heat from the fireplace and the noise of boisterous conversation, but it became silent and slightly cooler as Wrath stood, his body trembling with anger, his fists tight at his sides. "You bastard!" he growled, seeing Brigg in the fireplace. "I should kill you." He started across the room. Burl stood in front of him. Before Wrath could even think about it, the hilt of the butcher knife-like sword was in his hand, and the point was touching the place on Burl's neck where his bushy red beard started. The big man stepped back and fell into a chair. Briggs' eyes were scanning for a non-existent exit. "I should kill you," growled Wrath. "If I don't do it right now, it's only because I'm not your destroyer. But tomorrow morning I am leaving, and if I see any of you between now and then, I'll cut you open and hang you from the trees by your entrails. Do you hear me?" The villagers stared at him. "I said, do you hear me?" Most of them nodded mutely. Wrath turned on his heel and marched out, slamming the door after him. The sun was nothing more than a patch of orange in the west as he strode to Mistybrook's house. He stepped inside and for the first time made sure that the lock, nothing more than a 1-inch by 4-inch piece of wood held onto the doorframe with a single nail, was engaged. He turned to Mistybrook, standing in the center of the room, her arms beckoning. In 2 steps he was with her, enveloping her in his arms. She tilted her head up and he kissed her waiting lips. She reached beyond her neck and unfastened her dress, let it fall to the floor, and leaving her gloriously naked, he ran his hands over her pearlescent skin. "Make love to me," she said. Wrath woke. He felt suddenly cold. Looking up, he saw Mistybrook standing in the center of the room, looking down at him. She had a blanket wrapped around her, but one shoulder and one white leg peeked out. On her hip was a birthmark in the perfect shape of a human hand. "You didn't kill him," she said. He climbed to his feet and went to her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "You didn't even kill him." "No, I didn't," he replied. "We're leaving. We're getting out of Fenwood." "Get dressed," she said. Then she sat down and watched him pull on his pants and shirt, his boots and jacket, and finally belt the sword around his waist. "Now you," he said. "Now you get dressed." "I'm not leaving. It's not time yet." "We have to leave." He knelt by her chair and took her hand. "We can't stay here. We can still be together." "We will be together again," she said, "and when we are, it will be forever. But I can't leave now. It's not time." Mistybrook stood, and he rose to his feet. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders, kissing him deeply on the lips. "I've prepared a few things for you." She waved toward the table. In its center was a backpack and a bulging leather water skin. When he made no move to get them, she picked them up and wrapped them around him. She slung the water skin over his shoulder. "Now go." Wrath stepped toward the door and then stopped. "No, don't turn around," she said. He did anyway. Her pale body was glowing as the light from the window hit her from behind. "Well, all right," she said, "but this is the last time." He nodded and then stepped out the door. He made his way to the edge of the village, and he saw a few faces peer out of windows, but no one stepped outside and no one confronted him. Walking east and then south, he came to the stream and followed its bank, down the hill and through the woodlands. Only when the sun was high in the sky did he stop and look behind him. He could no longer see any sign of human habitation, not even smoke in the sky.
Well, that's all for this week's Family Quest. Thanks for stopping by. Please do all the YouTube things. And as always, keep on Minecrafting.